Alright guys, today I'm going to show you how to create this beautiful trail effect on Blender. So this is going to be completely beginner friendly tutorial, even though we are using geometry nodes within this tutorial to create this beautiful trail effect. So I'll go ahead and explain everything. So with that being said guys, let's get into the video and see how to create this beautiful effect in Blender. First of all guys, I'll delete my default stuff and I'll get this right here a little bit up, and then I'm gonna select my geometry node. Secondly, I also want a path to move my trail, so I want to have a spiral path. Also, it doesn't matter, you can definitely use any path like a Bezier curve, a circle, or anything down here, but I much prefer using that spiral path. So let me apply the spiral path. By default you can find a spiral path under your default adds, so I have to go here and under the preference you have to add the spiral path options. So it is not in the add-ons, but you have to go into the get extensions and then you have to find to extra. Right now extra curve objects is the one you have to install. In my versions it's already installed, so you have to install in order to get the spiral path. Right, I'm going to close down this window and then look for the spiral path right here. So you can see spirals, and then we have Archimedean, and then you can select that, and then we have a couple of options right here. So I'm going to set a little bit of height like this, and then also we can increase the turns to something like 3. I think I much prefer this version of the spiral, and then I can close down this window. Right, my path is ready, and then we can select this, go into the object mode, and then we can select that, and then under the geometry editor you have to select the new button in order to create a geometry node. Now you can see that is by default you have 2 nodes. These are the basic primitive nodes. We can see the input nodes and the output node. And then first of all I'll add a point node, so you can search for points, and as you can see, so you can add the point node. So what essentially I'm going to do here is I'll get extra details or extra settings for this path. So you can search for sample curve. Now you can see the sample curve here. So what essentially this node does is simply it gets some of the details of the curve as output, like the position and value, etc. So let me show you that within that, then you can understand that much better. Now first of all I'll get my curve right here. This is the geometry input, which basically the curve right here. So if you unplug this one, and you can see my curve is gone because there is no any output to show. So now what we're gonna do guys, now first of all I'll select my input geometry, and then I'm gonna plug it to the curve. What essentially does is simply this group input gets the curve data to the sample curve. It is getting all this curve data, and it can now interact with the factors and all the positions of the curve and etc. So we don't have anything to show off right now because we have no green node output from this one. So we have to have some kind of way to connect my points and this one to get some output. In order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and use set position, right? Because set positions has a geometry output, so I can plug it my geometry output to this, and then what I want to do is simply I'm going to put my geometry input to the set position, and right now you can see a point is spawned exactly at this center. So this doesn't have any position. Right now it is 0. Now you can move these original positions. Now if you want, right now you can see that is also moving in this scene view. It is because the point has its own position, but we don't use this position. Basically we want to use the curve's position on the points, right? Actually what we want is we want to move the point along the curve, right? In order to do that, we want to have a positions from our curve, right? So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna connect my position node of the sample curve to the set position. Right now if you go here into the factor, and then if I try to increase the factor, right now you can see it is moving along the curve. Even though we can see the curve, it is moving along the curve. One real quick problem is that we can't see the curve even though we can't see the point. It's because we have connected my points node into the output geometry node. There is no curve node connected directly to the point node, right? It is only getting some of the informations to the sample curve. We're getting just the position output from the sample curve. We're not getting any mesh output or a curve output as a geometry right here from the sample curve. That's why we can't see the curve as the output, right? We can't see that. So what we can essentially do is we can copy this one, and then we can come over here, and then we can connect that to the geometry. And right now we can see the curve, but we can't see my point. So we gotta have some way to show off both these geometries. So in order to do that, we have to have another node called join geometry, right? So I'm going to use the join geometry. I'm going to get a little bit of space here, and then I'm going to plug this one to this like that. And so now we have my curve geometry, and then I have my point geometry like this. Now if you change the factor to 1 from 0, it also moving along the curve, and also we can see the curve right now. So I'll get this one a little bit there, and then we have room in the center. So this is the really tricky part. And then I'll add another node which is called simulation node. This one is really powerful node, right? This came after the Blender version 3.6, I think. So what essentially this one does is it show off all the each steps that are going to be happening in between the animation, right? So in order to do that, we have to have an animation first of all. So I'm gonna make my point moving along the curve within 100 frames, right? So in order to do that, I'm gonna pull another window here, and then I'll select my timeline, and we have 250 frames, so we don't need that. So I'm gonna reduce that to 100, and so we are in this first frame. So I'm gonna go here, and then we are selecting the factor, and then hover the cursor over to the factor, and then hit I key on the keyboard to keep track of these frame. And then we're gonna go all the way to the end frame, and then I'm gonna type in 1, and then hit I again to make another keyframes right now. And you can see that if you play the animation right now, you can see it is moving along the curve. Right, now we can go back to here. So the simulation node is basically it keeps tracking all these motions along the curve, right? Let me show how it working, right? So first of all, I'll also use another join geometry in order to connect that. So we have it is in the memories, and I'm going to use that. And then we are selecting my geometry node right here, and then I'll plug it into the geometry setup. And I also want to get this right here and then plug it in. So we're gonna disconnect this one right here, so we can control right click to disconnect, and also this one I'm gonna disconnect this one as well. So I'll take this right here, and so I'll connect the output to this geometry, and there is no any different. And so I'm gonna plug this one to this, right? So right now we have this setup. So this is what it does right now. If you play this right now, you can see it is tracking all the motions, and it keep tracking everything. And we can see even we have a 1 point right here, it is keep tracking all these motions along the path, right? It's something like that. So it's crazy, right? So first of all, I'll group this part. So I'm gonna rename this. This is going to be my point setup, right? So this is going to be my point setup, and yeah. So, and then in between that, I don't want to have all these things to be tracked down like this, because this is not essentially a trailer. So I want a couple of points, like 10 to 20 points are moving along the curve. I don't want that points to be spawned all over the curve. In order to do that, I'm going to use another node which is called stored name attribute, right? First of all, explaining, I'll add another one. So this is going to be a math node. So you can clearly, so you have to make sure that it's not color. So you have to make sure that is math add node. And then we can also use another node called name attribute. So this one, we're going to go align these things like that. And so what I'm going to do, I'll change my store name attribute to float to integer. And in the name attribute also, we're going to use the integer. And in the name sections, this is really important. So we're gonna go ahead and use a name. So we can type in something like life, right? So it's going to be keep track of the life of these points. So, and then I'll add my value to the value, and then I'm going to add my attribute to the value. So and then I'll type 1 as this. So since my animation is done, so I'm going to join this one down, and then we have more space here. So also I want to get the name attribute right here as the life, right? So these two names supposed to be the same, right? These two names should be same. This node setup is not that complicated. You can think about like, so this is store some data in a string called life, right? So what essentially does, so when all these particles, all these points are moving along this simulation, it takes one point at a time and it saves its data in the live string, right? So it is passing that to this live here, right here, and then it add a 1 every single time, and it pass that values to the back into the stored attribute. Now if you go here, you can see it is this one right here, it is the 0, and this one is supposed to be 1, and this one 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Likewise, all the way to this one, that the end one has the highest number, right? So you can understand like that, right? So we have a tracking system. Now we want is a constant value to track the lifetime, because I want essentially simply I want to delete some of the particles when it hits some threshold value. Like for example, let's say that now you have 20 particles in the line. So if this one is 20, I want to delete the 21 and all the other particles in the curve. And then we have only 20 particles remaining. So that's what essentially we want to achieve. So in order to do that, so I'll get another name, store name attribute. So this time I'm going to put that one here, and then this time we're going to call another attribute, let's say live time. These names can be anything you can type in, but every single time you have to, when you're using these strings anywhere else, you have to make sure exactly the correct string is used. I'm gonna get another node, and this time we're gonna go an integer. So this integer is going to be constant, and then I'm gonna plug it into the value node. So I'm gonna type 20 because I want 20 particles along the curve. So in this way we have only 20 particles moving along the curve, right? Now if you play this, there's no any change because only we have assigned some data to each of the points. Now each of the points are carrying all these values, right? Every points are carrying 20 as a constant value, and each points are having different life value. And then we have to find out a way to understand what points are, you know, past the lifetime. Like, so in order to do that, so I'm going to use you know, greater than function. So this is a math function, so we can use a greater than function. So even though we have used greater than functions, we have to have a delete system. So that's why we have to use a delete geometry node, right? Now we have a delete geometry node. I'm gonna get the delete geometry node right here, and then after you can see there is, so our all geometries, all the points are gone, and so you can see that it's not affected to my curve because my curve is outside of the simulation. It is after this delete geometry, so that's why it is not affected right here. Now if you go ahead and connect my value to the selection, so I want to keep these values as this, and then I want to set this one greater than as this. Right now I'm having a value and a threshold value, right? So you can think like what's going to be the threshold value. So the threshold value is going to be my constant value. So the threshold value is a 20 because that is going to be the constant value. I have to check for all the points, and these attribute values is going to be my life value. So I'm going to plug my life value to the value node. So this is going to be this one, this greater than function is checking every single points, and essentially it finds out what point has a life value greater than the integer 20, right? So now we can see, so all my points that are greater than 20 life values are just deleted. Now if you play the simulation, you can see just 20 particles are moving along the curve, right? So I think the 20 is a little bit higher, so I'll reduce that to 10. I think 10 is much better. So now you can see it is moving 10 particles, right? So you can go ahead. So I'm gonna go and then I'm gonna group this one as well. So I'll rename this one, and then let's say delete points on, let's say, life, right? So we halfway done the simulation. Now we can convert these points to a stroke. So in order to do that, I'll get this one a little bit there, and then we have, so all the things are going to be after the simulation setup right here, right? So we've done the simulation setup, and then I'm going to go ahead and add a points to curve option. So I'll add that node, and then you can see my points are converted to a curve. Right now you can see that is right here, so it is barely visible because I have two curves right here. So now you can see it is moving as well. But in order to see that clearly, I want to add another node. This time I'm going to go ahead and convert my curve to a mesh. So this time I'm going to convert my curve to a mesh. In order to curve to mesh to work, I have to have another node. This time we have to make a circle, curve circle. So I'll use a curve circle. So this is going to be my profile curve. Right now you can see a curve is moving like this, and so I can reduce my the radius. I think 0.05 would be nice. And then also, and I can fill the caps right here, and then you can see that it's filling the cap. And now if you close a little bit, that my curve is a little bit jaggedy. Right now you can see it is a little bit not smooth, so I can smooth that a little bit. And so I'm gonna go ahead another one. This is called spline, set spline time. So I'll add that to here, and then I'm gonna also go ahead and then resample curve. Right, so in these two curves are doing is simply it is smoothed out this part right here, this curve, it is smoothed out. So what we're going to do here that we'll select the cut mode ROM under the set spline type, and then we'll select we increase that. Now you can see that is when we increasing that is going to be smoothed out. So I'm going to type in like 30. I think 30 would be enough for our case. Maybe if you want, we can group this one out as well. So like we have pretty much done our simulation. Essentially what we want is we want to have some material on this to get my final look, right? So I'll keep this one a little bit there, and then I'll add call something material and a set material. I add the set material right here. So always have to add the set material after the curve mesh, because we can add the material to a curve or a point. It has to be a mesh, right? That's why we are adding the material right here. So now we can select the material right here. So we have the default material. If you don't have, so you can simply create a material going into here, and then you can apply that right here. Okay, so I'll go here into the material preview, and I'm going to split my window here, and then also I'm going to go here to shader editor, and let's choose my material right here, and then I'm going to type in something like let's say maybe trail matte. Right now you can see it changed in color, right? So this is material. So I want a gradient along this. So I want to disappear this part like a little bit like a gradient. So in order to do that, I'm going to use a color ramp. So I'll plug it in and then plug the color node right here. Now, so there is no way we can understand or the Blender can understand simply where are the ends and where are the start of this curve. So we gotta have some way to get that data to the mesh, right? To the shaders simply. So in order to do that, simply how we're gonna achieve that, simply we have to use another node. So this time we also use the store name attribute. So we're going to use the store name attribute again. So it's going to be before my mesh, because this is going to be basically related to the curve setup. So we're going to use this node to understand the curve length. So in order to understand the curve length, so I have to use another one. So this is going to be spline parameter, right? The spline parameter is essentially, it is basically 1 to 0 value. So it is getting the factor value 1 to 0. So always going to be starts going to be 0 and endpoint going to be 1. So all the way in between, all the way is going to be divided to in between values, right? So that is the factor value. So it is plug it into value. So we have to have a color attribute here, and also assign a string name. This is going to be color. Right now we can use this color attribute value here to shade it out. So we can use attribute node here in the shader, and I'm going to plug it here, and then I'll type in color. So I have to use the exact name. As I said before, you have to use the exact word used right here. So it is color, so I'll type color right here. So now you can plug your color node to the factor, and then now you can see my gradient is working fine. Now you can see it is perfectly working, but I don't need harsh split going on here. So I'm going to keep this one right here as this. Instead of changing anything in the color ramp, I'm going to connect my color node to the alpha. Right now you can see it is working fine because now I have a kind of a gradient going on in this trail, right? Also we can do something here in the emission. So I'm going to use the color node, the same output to the emission as well, and then I'm going to type in some emission like maybe 10. And also since my preview was in red, so I'm going to change my color to some bright red like that. So this is pretty much it, and then I can render this one out to get more details to this. So I can simply add a camera because I want to use some compositing. So I'm going to use my camera viewport like that, and then let's see, we can go and change my camera to something like that. Right, now if you play this, now you can see it's perfectly moving like that. Right, cool. And then we can go here into the compositing, but before I'm going to render this one out like this. So now we can go here into the compositing, and then we can create a new compositing, and then we can add another node here. This is in the compositing. I'm going to go here and find out the glare node, right? So we're going to use the glare node. Now we can see the glare effect is affecting the stroke here. Also you can use a float go or a bloom. I think, yeah, the bloom is much better. So I'm going to use the bloom, and then I'm going to go back to my window. I'll connect this one, and then I'm going to get a little bit of room here. And so in order to see my glowing effect or the compositing effect in the scene, I can go here. So I can enable the always under the compositor here. So then you can see my glowing is working fine in this scene as well. So this is the final output. So yeah, so that's it guys. So I think that was really a simple setup. Now if you go here into the geometry node, I also put my project file down below in my page or somewhere here, so you can find it out if you don't want to manually do all this stuff. So and cool thing is that guys, now if you have created these setups, for example, now I'm gonna hide this one. Now if you want something else like another Berserker or something, so you can simply use this geometry node to this one as well. So if you go ahead into the modifiers, and then under that, now if you use the geometry node, and then if I select my current geometry node that we've been creating, now if you play this, the effect is perfectly working on my new code. So that is the beauty of the geometry node. So if you learned something from this tutorial guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't. So with that being said, I'll see you in the next one.